I'm honored to be with such a diverse group of presenters. We have a reporter, a cultural anthropologist and designer, a type designer, I would say interviewer, graphic designer and publisher, and of course a modern dancer, calligrapher. And as you now all know, my area of expertise in typography is letterpress printing. I've been a printer for a long time. I hate to say how long. But so one of my first questions I wanted to ask, or I will answer myself, is we were all asked to insert a word. Type more blank than ever. And we see a lot of words popping up. And I know I thought about this. And my word is vital. And so why did I choose that word? And everyone's going to have to answer this question. So you might as well think now. And I chose vital because I view typography as the heartbeat that will maintain the lives of our languages, not only as cultural artifacts, but as an important component to the sustaining connectivity of ideas and thoughts across our digital landscape. That's why I chose vital. So I'll give you a chance to think. So why did you choose type more newsworthy than ever, Anne?
Very easy, because...
You think it's easy. You haven't heard my follow-up question.
All right. I think more and more people are curious about things that we've neglected in the past, basically the minutiae of things, or the small things that we used to take for granted. And I think journalists who work hard and ask questions to genius type designers can actually explain this mysterious trait to the general public. And it's incredible to sort of trace type design to its larger impact. And I think that's the most satisfying story. So,
just to follow up, do you think type can influence, or type design, choices of type, can influence the dissemination of news or the voice of the type chosen so much to change an opinion?
First of all, I think there are still many outlets that use typography that's illegible to a majority of people. For example, I don't think we still appreciate or like think of designing for accessibility as a first instinct. So first of all, access clarity, that's one. It's so funny. Sometimes I look at digital media and you could tell that a print designer was working on them, because you'll see vast like swaths of reverse white type on a dark background. So that's a problem and could be addressed. But are you asking about sort of this aesthetic quality of a serif, for example?
I'm asking what, and anyone else on the panel can answer this too if they want to. No, I'm asking from the point of view choice. I mean, do you find that a type has enough voice to change an opinion in the news?
I think it just first needs to be clear, and I don't know. That for me, clarity is first, but maybe there are wiser answers from.
I don't know if type alone can do that. To me, type is always used as a word, so
in context with message.
Yeah, and then it's applied within a certain color, with a certain hierarchy, and then saying something. And I think all of those come together, and that would definitely influence. I remember there's a book by Eric Spiekerman, Stop Stealing Sheep. And in it he compares...
Let's not finish the saying.
I'm sorry?
No, it's okay. It shows my age. I'll tell you off stage.
In it, he compares different typefaces and explains how that message is important. And he has an example of a flying lesson school done in a very hasty brush lettering. So I definitely would not register for that school to take any flying lessons. And I remember choosing sometimes a restaurant or an accountant to work with, or changing my mind depending on somebody's website. Like, I have a preconceived notion. I go to the website, like, this doesn't look trustworthy at all. Like, no, I'm not doing this. So I don't know if type alone can do that, but definitely combined with all the other elements that make a message is definitely opinion making.
I think type can absolutely change an opinion in branding. Let's just look at what happened when the Gap redesigned their logo. Nothing else changed in the store, but people were outraged by it. So I think that when you're evolving or changing the look of a brand that is represented with a certain typography or a certain iconography, and there's not an understanding as to why, I think that people can be heavily influenced by that change.
I have a collection of broadsheets which are used in Harare, Zimbabwe, and I think also in other Southern African countries, where like the top headlines for each newspaper, it's like a poster, one statement, like summarized, very kind of, they try to use catchy language, but it's actually very confusing language when you read it because of how language ends up being co-opted, or like things become colloquial, even if it's for serious, for a serious topic. And in the situation of Zimbabwe, where the government closed down independent news agencies, and then the government only their presses were printing, they're the only voice of authority. They're using a standardized visual, the type design, this very condensed, all caps, and with the really beautiful, bold masthead that it's just a standard format that all the news agencies use. And when you see those messages, the kind of thing that they want you to be thinking about, what they are projecting at you, so you don't look at what is actually going on, I think that type can change what happens in terms of us consuming the news, if people understand how to co-opt a voice, a visual language that projects authority.
Lastly, I want to add that type, again, like the cheese sandwich comment from Milton Glaser, it's one element in the whole visual presentation, I think.
And find out how type works? Is that the other part of the title?
Was that part? That was the other part of the quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and find out. Thank you, Milton. So, Notsi, I'm going to move on to you now. She's nervous. No, I'm just kidding you. So you said type more obscure than ever. So if you can expound on that word.
Well, I think when we talk about typography, when we're talking about design, it's a visual discipline, and we're often thinking about how to make things appealing, how to codify things, how to arrange content. You're pushing things into people's eyes. You're looking for them to consume, to read, to translate. But there's so much that is hidden. With our project Reading Zimbabwe, we talk about what has been submerged. It exists, but it hasn't been named, or it's been pushed to the side by other content. You can't see it in front of you. And a lot of that is written, a lot of that is in visual form, but it's just not in the forefront. It can't get to our eyes. And that gap we also want to visualize. So we're actually, the more and more we are studying what the published history of Zimbabwe is, which also touches other spaces, we're realizing how much still needs to be uncovered, how many gaps there are, how much is suppressed, how much we can't get to. Doing work in archives is all about managing access. You have to go through a lot of bureaucracy. Producing anything, trying to put something up online, there's all of this, capital that you need. There's a lot of, there's all these things that actually come in the way of us making what we're trying to make. And also distance and how the world is set up. There's power dynamics that influence what knowledge is. So actually, the obscurity is also what language, what typography has done to us as former colonial subjects. It's hidden, it's actually suppressed or shifted what our identity is. and it's very hard to recover any of those things. I mean, we're totally transformed people, and I mean, you take that, but how to deal with that? Basically, we are people who have to deal with erasure. So I can't make work without acknowledging that.
Did you want to say something? Oh, okay. And on a positive note, and I agree that's
It's not
no, it's not negative. No, I shouldn't say positive, but on a different definition of obscurity, and I always say this about good typography, is all at once important and innocuous. As we all know, when you're designing the phone, when you're designing wayfinding, typography that is good typography is obscure to most people. That's why we're always asked, why does typography matter? We don't want that question out there right now. But one of the reasons is because when it's good, it is not noticed sometimes because it's that good. Now I'm going to go, Wael, I'm going to go on to you, and you have type more Arab than ever.
Yeah, I mean, I tried different kind of words. I had political, type more political than ever. I was trying to find a word that can connect geographies and narratives, because a lot of the stories and projects that I showed had that through line, but it was too complicated. And then I realized that a lot of the stories I'm telling are about narrative, and the interesting part of my talk was the narrative that come from the people. So I decided to call it type more Arab and not Arabic. So I usually specify the language is Arabic, but Arab is an ethnicity, is the person. So it's a way to personalize type, to look at it as an identity, as a person, and that is as an ethnic belonging. And that's why I chose Arab. But it's also short and small and cute.
But I have to thank you for the clarification, because I'm not quite sure people here associate it to a person, not to the typeface.
I was telling my friend, and he thought it was a mistake. And he they spelled your title wrong. It should be Arabic, not Arab. I was like, no, it's not.
I'm going to skip over you, Debbie,
Okay.
because I noticed I don't have a word for you.
Maybe we should ask her if she had.
Well, if you
Imagine that.
She was on
oh,
the
you
spot.
did have a word. I
I had a
didn't
word.
see the
I
word.
had a
It
word.
wasn't printed for me.
Oh, it was potent.
Oh, okay. So, Debbie, explain potent.
Well, I think we're living in really turbulent times, and messaging and tweeting and all manners of communication are being examined really, really carefully. And in many ways, I think the condition of our messaging reflects the condition of our culture. And right now, it feels that there's a lot resting and riding on the way we communicate and the way we're communicated to. So there.
Okay. And again, the word potent has several meanings, in terms of,
Yeah, I was thinking powerful at first,
Powerful.
but I thought that was kind of cliche.
right.
It seemed like more powerful than ever. And then I came up with potent.
Yeah. It's
The thesaurus might have helped.
yeah, shorter too, but it's interesting. And Kris, obviously, I really am supportive of this type, more in need of handwriting than ever.
Yeah, but I'm happy to say that after attending this conference and listening to the talks, I wouldn't say that anymore. My statement was type more in need of handwriting than ever, because I think that we do so much designing of just putting together repeatable parts that we're missing the story that every letter tells, the path of somebody's hand. But then I came here today, and so many young designers are showing samples of calligraphy. You're talking about writing, that I'm not sure it's more in need of handwriting than ever. I think we're finally getting the influence of the moving hand that we need. It's really encouraging to me. Yeah.
But has handwriting become highly specialized again? As I said early in the United States, they are removing cursive learning from our educational system. So does it mean you have to learn cursive? You have to learn a letter form? in college. You have to get to that point.
Well, I didn't say more in need of calligraphy than ever.
No, I don't
but-
mean calligraphy.
Okay, you mean like special individualized?
just handwriting with the hand. I mean, they're taking that away from a lot of students. I see people
Well-
shaking their heads up and down.
Yeah, well, no, let's not take it away, because it's the movement that's the key, I think.
Type a lot, but what do you do when your phone dies? You have to write.
Yeah.
I don't understand why more people aren't in the street protesting, giving up cursive. I mean, it's unthinkable to me that that's not something that we're going to learn. I mean, aside from the magnificent posters that used to line the ceiling of the top of the walls in all of our elementary school classes.
Yeah.
But still, how is that possible? How do you write a signature without cursive?
Well, we saw Donald Trump's signature, so that's what happens.
That's what.
Well, and we have to understand that. Okay, signing your name
Make
to
cursive great again.
Right.
Oh, excellent.
signing your name used to be your ability to sign your name was the indication that you were an educated person.
And what about all the handwriting analysts? They're all going to go out of business.
And the function of the brain, everyone knows that the ability to put two letters together is very neurologically complicated. If you didn't know this, your brain is far more exercised by writing. So to remove it removes an incredible, valuable function of the brain neurologically. And it's also a symptom to many neurologists if there's a problem with your brain. If you cannot write your name, there is something terribly wrong. And so it's funny, but it's serious, and doctors will attest to this and say, well, do you have a problem writing your name? And then if you do, then it's a serious problem, because they say neurologically it's very difficult to make those connections, and it's difficult to lose them. So it's an indication of something serious. But I didn't want to get morbid about typography. So the other question I have, and I love stories, of how we got here. I mean, Kris had a very interesting story, and we all have interesting stories. I was supposed to be a lawyer. Ah, yeah, I know. My mother was very sad when I decided not to go to Cornell School of Law of Labor Relations, and I heard the word, juxtaposed. And I said, oh, I'll be a fine artist. And then I had to feed myself. And I said, okay, I can learn this. And I went through, fine art history, thought I'd be an art restorer. Then did my master's in design, and that's when I discovered letterpress. So my expertise and love of type comes from a very, very physical point of view. But I understand the value of higher education and what it has taught me in terms of being a good designer, good typographer. I won't use the word great or established. But I found something very interesting, and I want everyone's comment about this, about learning and the value of higher education, especially the students who are here studying at SVA. There's a reason you came here. And I told this story at lunch today. Our exhibit designer, we're working for her H-1B visa, and her application was rejected because they felt you did not have to go to college to become a graphic designer or typographer by our government. Whoa. So I thought that was very strange. And again, how do we, number one, think about the value of education and the importance of it to our field? And how do you convince those who are not in our field? And Carol mentioned this too. When someone looks at you and with a blank face and says, well, what do you do? How do you explain to someone what you do, or do you not explain to them? Wael, what do you do?
How do I explain what graphic design is?
Or type design, even far more
Yeah,
obscure.
I don't try doing that if they if they don't get graphic design. But I mean, to me, the importance of graphic design became evident when I was a kid, when I was 14 years old, and when we got our first home printer, and at that time it was not common to have a printer at home to print things. But to me, everything that was printed, everything that was books, had some authority in it. It was the truth, it was the lessons, it was what we referred to, it was the message that's been approved and consolidated in a printed word on a page. Everything else that's handwritten, and like the notes, the personal things that don't matter. So I was bickering with my brother. I have one older brother. He's 1 year older than me, and we bicker a lot. And I remember I was 14 years old, and our dad got us our first scanner and computer and the whole set all at once. And I wanted to get back at him, and I went into Microsoft Word, and I found a clip art of like some silly animal, and then I typed his name on top of it, and I printed it, and I put it in his face, like, look, here it is. And I remember feeling so powerful, and he just looked at me like, but to me, that was like, this solidifies something. This is a message of power. And that I remember that it made me feel like I had the power in creating a message and disseminating it and presenting it to the world as an ultimate truth. And I think that is the power of graphic design to me, comes from that. The ability of being, having agency in forming a message and telling it to the mass is very powerful still.
Everyone else, did you always know that we have a few minutes, did you always know you wanted to be in the typography or design field, whether you write about it or you speak about it?
I was a painter before, so when my bio was read, I have a exhibition history and stuff I did back home in Zim isn't documented on my bio anymore, because in Zimbabwe, so many people left the country that if we wanted the art scene to continue, we had to just kind of do everything. So I've art directed for dance and theater. I've curated exhibitions at our National Art Gallery, but I had a very robust art career. I painted portraits on commission that gave me more money than my teaching, painting and drawing to high school students. And I actually only started learning graphic design because I wanted to quit my teaching job and go into painting full time. So Sakima Fundikwa had a design school in Harare, Zimbabwe, and I heard about it and I was like, okay, I want to go. I was 27 at the time. I started teaching straight out of high school. As I taught for a long time, I wanted to get out of teaching, wanted to focus on exhibiting, and I begged my older sibling to support this. Both our parents had both passed away by the time I was 13. And so higher education was never something that I thought I would actually attain. So all those years whilst I was teaching, I was using teaching as a platform for me to learn, learn through like learning to do it because I need to show my students how to do it, or bring other people into the space of the classroom who I felt were experts and I could also watch and learn at the same time. And I also realized that the space of education is a thing you can create on your own. You can have peers. A school just locks all these things in, resources that give you information about the thing that you want to learn, people around you that are interested in the same thing, mentors, examples of other work that's been made in the same vein, or disciplines next to. You can go out and find all of that in the world yourself, and that's what I had to do up until the age of 27. And when I studied with Saki, I learned that he had studied at Yale. And he asked me what I was doing after graduating, and I was like, I got my diploma. I'm going to go and make business cards and letterheads for people so I can make money and support my painting career. And he had, I'd researched Sheila de Bretteville's work and written some papers about her for my thesis, and shared them with her. I'd been interviewing her, and then she invited me to apply for the program. And that's how I ended up studying at Yale. I didn't really want to invest all those years in learning about graphic design, but I also am very interested in thinking about how design has added a layer to content that comes from Africa and hasn't always been very sensitive in teasing out like the content or the sensibility of people or the values. And so that's the work that I focus on now as a designer. I work with artists of color here in the US, Black American, African. We just made a book for BC Silver. She passed away, sadly, 2 years ago, but it's a whole survey, 6 years of an art workshop that happened in 5 different cities in Africa, and it really illuminates and gives presence and visibility to a whole art community that is ignored by many other spaces.
I think most of us, and we have 2 more people, the most of us really feel empowered, as Wael says, by our ability to feel we have some control over the message and the dissemination, of the visual dissemination. Debbie, did you always want to do this?
No.
Do you still want to do it?
No, I love what I do, but no, I mean, Kris and I
Really?
talked a little bit about it in our interview. I
Right.
had no guidance. My sole criteria for choosing the State University of New York at Albany was that my best friend Tammy was going.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But also, I had to go to a state school. There was no possibility of anything but a state school because it was more affordable. I have a degree in English literature, and a degree. My minor was in Russian literature, so I often joke now that I have a degree in reading.
Well, and it's very interesting, and maybe now that you write about typography, do you think one day you will be designing what you write?
Well, I'm a graphic designer. Before
That's right, I
all
forgot.
that, but like I don't know if I can venture into typeface design. It's sort of like incredible field. But I'm really glad you asked the higher education question. I want to say that the SVA program in design criticism really made me feel capable of becoming a journalist. It wasn't the job at Quartz wasn't one that I applied for. So before that, I had a master's from Georgetown, which basically taught me how to read slowly and closely. We had I remember a wonderful theology class was called Travel, the Quest for Bewilderment. And it was weeks and weeks of that. And that was wonderful. But Decrit, or Design Research Now, taught me how to be scrappy and to not be afraid to call people. There's one class convened by Stephen Heller called No Google Research. Has this been mentioned a lot?
Well, and I agree. I just want to end because I'm getting signals, time to go. I think we can all agree on the stage that to be a good designer, to be a good type designer, whether you're designing in Arabic or in Cyrillic or Hangul, or to be just a good designer, is a compilation of experience. And the more experience you can have outside of Google or outside of one device will make you a better designer, whether it's typography, graphics, fine art. And I want to thank you all for this and thank
you.
everyone. Unless we have any questions, I don't know if we're opening it up to questions. No? Do we have time? Reception or one more panel. So I want to thank you again, and I apologize if anyone had a question. You can always ask us at the reception. But thank you being such a wonderful, diverse group of thinkers.
Thank you.